Welcome, everyone, to Stepping Into Your Leadership. I'm your host, Christine Courtney. Our goal here is to give you some actionable takeaways that will help you lead your teams. Thanks for joining us on this leadership journey. Let's get started. Hello, welcome. We are talking today about power of invention and creativity and innovation and whatever words you and your organization use to talk about the idea of how ideas and problem solving come to life. And it's such an important topic. I brought one of the best people in our organization at inventing things, coming up with ideas, millions of them. It seems never ending to me, and something that I really appreciate in her. And so Blonka Winkfield is back with us in the studio today. Hello, Blonka.
Hello.
The reason I also invited Blonka is because not only is she a good example of this in our organization, she also is just a highly creative person in all parts of her life and is constantly creating something new, whether it's a jewelry business in the past on the side, working with her alumni organization through Howard University, mentorship opportunities for folks, and just a go-to person for everybody that's coming up with new ideas or wants to bring ideas to fruition. So Blonka, welcome. I'm excited to talk about this and how all of you out there who want to either maybe be more innovative or creative, or certainly have your companies or departments be so as well, talk a little bit about that process and how we can encourage and create cultures where it's able to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with how would you maybe define what that means to you? Do you see a difference between creativity, invention, and innovation? And if so, how would you define kind of those differences?
Totally. I think they're all very different things. Creativity is something that's just really innate. It's in you, and it's a thing I think that can cultivate, but a lot of it is just very natural. It's just an intuitive, innate thing that most people have. Invention really is creating something brand new from scratch. How they say necessity is the mother of invention. So it's something that you've never seen before. It just came out of nowhere. Innovation is really kind of like putting a new coat or some lipstick on a thing that already was. So you already have a problem or an issue, and then you fix it. You make it better. You innovate it. You move it to the next level. So those are three, kind of different things. I think the more creative you are, the better you are at innovation. And I think you absolutely have to have some level of creativity to really invent things. So, I think there's different levels to it, the invention, innovation, and creativity.
And we hear innovation is such a buzzword in organizations all the time that I'm not even sure it has any meaning left anymore, because every company says that they do that, right?
Right.
But because I guess to some extent we're hopefully making things better, but that's not always the case. And
No.
and certainly I think inventing, coming up with brand new ideas, like you said, is really hard to do, and really hard to do in the face of all the demanding work that people do, just the workload process. I hear all the time, people are like, I'd love to come up with something new, but I just don't have the time for it. That being said, I think there are probably ways and I've seen it even within our organization, there are ways that we can help create a culture of this so that even if people are strapped for time, that it's embedded in the workplace, right? So that it happens more often. I was looking up some data on this that was quite startling. And it said that according to Gallup, only 29% of employees strongly agree that their workplace is a great environment for creating new ideas. So imagine that, only 29% of employees, and also employees who feel that they have a platform to present new ideas are 4.5 times more likely to say they are inspired to perform their best at work. And that was Harvard Business Review.
I think that is a very good point, because one of the big things about especially invention or innovation is experimentation. So especially with invention, you have to be able to let people try new things, run fast and break things. Not a lot of companies have that mindset. They're like, we have to make sure we're not failing too often. We have to make sure that everything is being done the right way. We have to make sure that everybody's following these guidelines. And invention doesn't happen that way. Innovation kind of can, but invention never happens that way. Inventing, and part of the reason why I think you feel like I'm good at this and why I might be, is that my background is in science. Having a science background and having a scientific mindset, that's all you do is experiment. You have an idea, you try, and then it works or it doesn't work based on your hypothesis that you came up with. So all of science is about failing and succeeding, trying and trying again. I tried this. Oh, I'm going to add more of this. Oh, no, that didn't work. I'll change, to this cell line, whatever it is.
Mm.
Companies don't work that way. It's not like I built this new Escalade and, oh, now we're just going to scrap it and try, they do a little bit of that, the engineers do, but that trickling down throughout the company doesn't really work. So the engineers get to be, very inventive and innovative in their jobs. But then the person on the sales team, they may be like, hey, I figured out a new way to do sales. And the manager's like, no, we need it to be this way because there's so many other processes that hinge on it. So we don't want to change it too much, even though you think your new thing might be better. You know what I mean? So it's.
Yeah. I love that you said that, because the other data point that I was going to look at that I thought was interesting that I was going to share was that 42% of employees cited a lack of time or resources as the primary barrier to engaging in creative and inventive work. But the other thing is exactly ding, ding, ding. What you said was the fear of failure is the other major obstacle, with 34% of employees saying they do not propose new ideas because they worry about criticism or negative outcomes. And that was a KPMG global innovation study. So, I mean, think about that. It's like time or resources or fear of failure. So if we who are in positions of leadership can look at those three things, can we create more time and resources for innovation? And can we try to get rid of or lessen the fear of failure? You probably can never get rid of it. But if you can lessen it, if you can do those three things, you're going to increase your possibility for invention so much more. And companies that really focus in on this produce more, right? They're 3.5 times more likely to be top performers in the industry if they focus on invention. I mean, that makes sense because you're creating new things.
Totally. And that's the thing about it. So, because when you invent something, you're really figuring out what the root cause of an issue is. Like, what's the real thing here? And if you can figure that out and find a solution for it, you win. That's a highly sustainable, model. Invention is really about the long-term, impactful solutions, not a band-aid, not something that's a quick fix. And people usually go with that because it's usually easier. In air quotes, it's usually more cost effective, so those things, it's like, oh yeah, it's quicker to do this. They don't have to spend too much time thinking about it, how to implement it, how to roll it out, all those things. It might be easier. But if you really dig in and figure out, my client has a problem, what's at the root of that problem? Can we create something new and innovative that they've never seen before? They come to you for that and they're going to move with that. Like that's a real thing. It's kind of like an Amazon thing. Like there was online shopping before that wasn't new or improved. Jeff Bezos didn't invent online shopping. What he did was he invented a new way to look at retail in total. Like just, we're going to blow it out of the water. We're going to invent a completely new way to look at retail. We're going to have 1,000 retailers all on one site doing online shopping, as opposed to everybody else was like, it's my store, it's my J. Crew store, just me, da 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 da. Completely, new idea.
Yeah. And to be fair, it started off as books, right? And then they were able to innovate, which means, right, take that and then reproduce that for lots of other things in the process. But I was curious because I think sometimes we think that these changes in our culture have to be huge. And so I was curious, as somebody like yourself who likes to problem solve, who loves to come up with new ideas, not just what's some examples of things, I guess, in your life or at work where you've been able to do that? Or what makes that easier for you? Like if you were an employee in an organization, what could they do for you to make that more fertile ground for you?
I think one of the biggest things, and I think that we do this really well, is offer opportunities for people to voice their opinions. That's literally it. Be able to say, I want to try this, and be able to say, okay, and give permission and go try it and see how it works. I think that's the one thing. We don't have enough of that. We don't have enough brainstorming. Like, let's sit and really, really brainstorm, not brainstorm with that's not going to work ever, coming out before it even happens, before the person even says anything. Brainstorming in a box never works. You can't really contain a good storm in a box. So like really just like letting people come with the craziest ideas, the Velcro pants, the IDEO kind of concept, and then being able to say, okay, I don't know that I think it's right or not, but go forth into the night, give it a shot, and let's see where we go from there.
Yeah, just to explain her reference to Velcro pants, just in case you're not, that's one of the terms we use internally, which is a clue to us, a trigger that we need to stop yucking someone's yum and just let the brainstorm go to its full capacity, because we had, as a group, had watched a video from the company IDEO where they talked about I think it was like on 60 Minutes or something, but it was about really how they run their brainstorming process. They were inventing a new shopping cart was the task. And one of the ideas in their brainstorm was, I know, we get Velcro pants and we put them on the kids, because one of the problems is that kids were getting hurt and the safety issues of putting kids in those seats in the shopping cart. And so he said, if you could put Velcro on the bottom of the seat and kids in Velcro pants, then, you can create a safer shopping cart. And of course, that is a ridiculous solution. But the point is that those Velcro pants led to another idea that led to another idea that led to finally the solution. And if you didn't go as far as the crazy Velcro pants idea, you would have never gotten to the idea that actually could make sense. And so we use that internally. Sometimes we have to explain it because we did this, probably 15 years ago. And the point is that some new people in our organization are like, why do they keep talking about Velcro pants? So anyway, that's the trigger we use, but it can be like, hey, not time to yuck our yum. It can be like, we'll discern these ideas later, whatever it is. But right now we're going to just kind of go a little bit crazy. The more ideas, the better. And I agree with you. It can start as easily as how are you running your brainstorming process, and just training people on just how to facilitate groups around actual brainstorming would probably do a tremendous amount for the positive that way. That's a really good idea.
I was going to say one more thing.
Yeah.
And just, for people who run companies, like you mentioned, time was a big deal. It doesn't have to be all the time. The other thing I think companies should do, most companies have a retreat or something like that. Like, let people know, you know what, at this particular time of the year, we're going to focus on innovation. Save all your crazy ideas. We don't want to hear everybody's crazy idea at the 30-minute meeting that we have. We got to spend 15 of it talking you off the ledge. I know there's companies like that are like, we don't have time for this. But if you make time for it, and then you give people a heads up that, hey, at the retreat, we're going to spend a significant amount of time discussing what could be next? How can we solve our clients' biggest problems? And spend some time doing that. We did that, I remember, years ago with the big idea. We had our work retreat, and then one of the sessions at our retreat was coming up with the next big idea for our company. And that has, turned into leadership partners, turned into a bunch of things that we've done. So I think, for the people who are sitting there who are like managers, like, I don't have time for this on a daily basis. You might not. But if there's a monthly meeting or some bigger meeting where they're usually longer in time and a little bit freer with an agenda, put that in there and just, let people know it's coming so they can, save for all those ideas for that time.
That's a great idea. If you're a new manager, don't try to fit this in your weekly scrum. I love that. But really look, do you have a meeting every maybe quarterly or yearly that has more time for it? And then if you're going to have it, then think about how you want to structure it. What you just mentioned, we did one year, we did this process called the big idea, and we put people into groups cross collaboratively, because it's interesting. I think we didn't do it based on any
real data at that time.
Any data or knowledge, Lord knows, but we do luck into things every once in a while. And turns out the data does support that cross collaborative teams invent more than teams that you regularly work on. And it makes sense because you're shifting up the energy, right? You're shifting up the energy. And so we put people into cross collaborative teams, which you can oftentimes only do at an offsite or a retreat. And then we facilitated a process where they had to come up with an idea that we currently do not use. And it could be customer facing, or it could be internal in the way we run something, a process, but it had to be either a new product line, it had to be something that was brand new. And they had a significant amount of time to work on it. It probably didn't feel like it to the groups. I mean, you were in the group, so you would know better than me because I was facilitating, but basically they would go away for, a half day, 3-4 hours, come back, had to present to the bigger group their idea, right? Get some feedback and so forth. And then those groups had to try to stay alive basically during the year to try to make this come about. Now, you can imagine that that's where it started to get tricky. So once we went back to our busy work lives, those ideas started to naturally slip away. They naturally started to see, some of them started to see some of the problems with them. Like it was too difficult to get some of them off the ground. Maybe they were too pricey. It took too much time. We didn't have the resources yet. It didn't maybe catch on with the customer as quickly as we'd hoped. So some things naturally fizzled out. I did have some folks who work for us a little frustrated with the process, and there's probably ways I could have been better at it. But some people then said to me, we should do the same thing, but we need to vote on the ideas that go forward. And then we need to give them a budget for them and lots of other things that could have been put into our systems, into our process. But I will have to say that that is true. And what I liked about our kind of way that we did it is that it kind of naturally worked itself out to where the ideas that had the most momentum, that had the most draw to them did end up working. And we still use, like you said, we still use a lot of those things today from that big idea. Many years we have not had the time and people have not had the bandwidth to do it. We have refrained from doing it because you have to be ready to like put people in that and then allow them some time in their workday. It doesn't have to be a ton when you go back, but it does need to be some. It does need to be some, or they start to get real frustrated with, you know, how much people love group work. In high school, imagine in the workplace, right? Because this is extra on top of your job. And so,
and especially with it being cross collaborative teams.
And if you have a boss of that one team that's not into it, they're like, why are you giving Blonka up for all this time? This is, so I would hear a lot of those things. But overall, in hindsight, I'm super glad that we did it. And if I could, I would do that all the time. But some of those things get in the way for sure. Some people, everybody has to be into it. And if they had a good experience, they generally love it and they want to keep doing it. If their idea didn't pan out, they tend to be the folks that don't like the process. All right. So, the other piece of it, that one of the ways that I was able to really pinpoint that you were such an invention genius is that we are big believers in doing the 6 types of working genius. And we do it for ourselves internally. We also do it for lots of other organizations. And when I saw that you had the invention genius, I was like, of course she does. Of course. And I use this example all the time, that the difference is, and I think I'm good at innovating something, which is taking something and making it better, or discerning like this piece doesn't work or this could be better. Where I saw the difference is that I was trying to name something, a program that we had, and I wanted a good name. And I was literally I think I spent half a day on it. And I was like, I got to come up with this good name. And I'm like researching and I'm trying to figure it out. And my ego really wanted to name this big program that was going to go into some of our schools. And then finally, out of just sheer exhaustion, I turned to you because Blonka sat right across from me at the office. And she's like, what are you working on? Because I'm sure in my very stoic, no, I'm just kidding. I'm very dramatic. I'm sure she could tell because we face each other that I was, frustrated. And she said, what are you working on? I said, Blonka, I'm just frustrated because I can't come up with a name for this program. And she's asked me probably like 4 questions. And she's like, well, describe the program to me, which I did. And then she said, okay, well, who's it for? What is the kind of the vibe you want to get from it? Like you had a few questions and then you were like, okay, what about da 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 da, and you named me like 7 names right off the top of your head. And I literally, my chin hit the floor and then I was pissed because I was like, I was pissed at you for being so dang good. And then I was pissed at me for being so bad. No, but for also just wasting half a day when I could have just turned to you 5 seconds in and be like, Blonka, what do you think? Because now Blonka gave me, probably 7 names that I could have used. All of them were great, by the way. It just depends. And then I could take those names and do what I'm good at, which is then think about them, research them, discern them, whatever, change them a little bit. And then I'd be like, oh, I came up with this name. And she's like, great. Now Blonka feels good about herself. I feel good about myself. But now what I try to do is shorten that 3-hour time where I'm frustrated and I try to go to you quicker. Do you know what I mean? Or if I know we need to come up with a name, let me get this out to you right away so you can think about it. So which reminds me, after this, I need to talk to you because I have a name I need. But anyway, so I think it is important to be able to locate who are those people within our organizations. And something like the 6 types of working genius is a great way to do that and put it out there. I mean, I think everyone is creative. Some people just really like a blank whiteboard. They really like to start from scratch. Now, this is my question for you because some of my best friends are invention geniuses. And I have an idea that I'm not sure it's true. In the brainstorming process, right? Would you rather have time to think about it on your own first before coming to the group with your ideas? In other words, would you rather have a blank whiteboard, think about it, and then come to a brainstorming group? Or would you rather me, for instance, just say this is the thing in the group and go through that process all together?
For me, I am definitely more in the moment kind of person. I think it just comes to me quickly. And so I really, really am like, oh, and then go. Because for me, I will do, like if you tell me something ahead of time, I will definitely go down a rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then I think because I'm a scientist, you may overthink a thing when sometimes it's just the simplest answer is the answer.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, it happens quicker. If I'm in the moment, think about it for a little bit and then come back with the answer as opposed to having so much time to, like delve into it and think about it. What about this? And what about that? I'm always like the question behind the question. Like, what else is there? And then it takes a bit of the fun out of it for me personally.
Okay. So you would recommend if people or managers are bringing their team together, they don't necessarily need to tell them ahead of time, but just to bring up the idea or the problem or the opportunity in the meeting, and then just allow time in that meeting to go through a proper brainstorming process where every idea is welcome and you're just building on it. You're doing yes, and we could add on to here, and we could add on to here, so forth.
I think so. Now, the other thing about, having done Working Genius and knowing your genius is that if you're a boss who has a team of non-innovators, that may not be the way to go.
Yeah.
You may have, a team of people who really need that focus time. They really want to be prepared at every meeting. Like they don't like being caught off guard. They don't like being put on the spot. So if you have a team full of that, the other route might be better. I think that's one of the things that we spend so much time talking about, getting to know your team and exactly what kind of personality types they have and, how they work best. That's when it's really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people take that for granted. But when it comes time to do any kind of innovation, rejudging of a thing, when it comes to like working in project, you got to know who your people are so you can put them together in the best possible way. And then also you can set them up for success with however you're going to organize whatever they're doing that day.
Yeah, it could be that they know we're going to do a brainstorm and it's going to last this long.
Yeah.
So those people who hate it can know I can survive an hour or whatever it is.
Exactly.
All right, so let's go in our last few minutes. Let's give people, I love this part where we give people tips on how to foster more innovation within their workplace, whether it's within themselves or so maybe these tips could be for how to do this for yourself or how to do it for your teams. So do you have an idea of one kind of tip that you would give for people?
I think, and this is hard in the, big corporate space, but being flexible, being really, in order to experiment, you got to be flexible. It really increases your ability to succeed in a thing. You have to allow people to iterate and reiterate and go over their ideas and change. And it happens kind of quickly sometimes. And sometimes it's very long, but you as a person who, has put this task forward, you have to be agile and flexible with them as well. So you want to, like my favorite phrase, is run fast and break things. You got to allow people to do that. You got to if you're saying you want true innovation, you want new ideas, you want new products, you got to allow people to have that ability to run fast and break things.
Yeah, I love it. I think the other thing too is a lot of things that work is recognizing innovations and talking about them years later. Do you know what I mean? So saying this group worked on this happened so that people feel like, yeah, I was part of that. Or you create a culture where everybody wants to be a part of that, and to make sure that everybody on that team is recognized, not just the person who's the loudest at talking about it. But I do think that if you had, let's say at every staff meeting and you thought, I need to really get a culture that's more inventive, then you need to talk about what inventions, even if they're so tiny, that are happening and recognize that the team or the folks that worked on that every single time.
And then because then you start creating the culture of innovation. You start creating that culture of invention so that people see that the company values it. Everybody's talking about it, not every day, but it's the thing that's being brought up in meetings. So that's when it becomes like, oh, this is the kind of company I work for. They're interested in doing this. They're interested in something new. It's not like, I think people lose the startup mentality. You have that day one startup mentality where it's like, we're all here. We're in this game together. We're going to make it work. What are the ideas? Because everything's so brand new. Then after a while, a lot of companies get to a place where, oh, we have our systems. We have our ideas. But you can't keep that. You can't keep that level, that base level of enthusiasm and expect your company to go to a higher level when it comes to that.
Right. Tatiana, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I did. I just wanted to mention also to talk about failures too, and talk about the lessons learned from those failures so that there's still something gained from the things. So not that everything has to work, not that every invention has to be, or innovation has to be successful. It's just the trying. And so what was the try in that? Or what did we learn from that? Or what did we gain from that experimentation.
Yeah.
Yeah, very true. Because what Blonka mentioned before is absolutely true, that people don't want to fail. And so they don't even try. And so if you talk about the failures as being good things or being part of the scientific process, I guess is it. The other thing is if you can provide some percentage of time or resources towards this. So, Google is famous for giving 20% of time for employees and teams to work on these things. My only note would be don't say it's Friday afternoons, because what will happen is that people will invent themselves right over to the beach.
Exactly. It's a happy hour. Yeah.
It's a happy hour. Exactly. So you want to think about what does that really look like? And a lot of places can't do it, but it does, having some sort of time, even if it's to, as a team where you're working on it and getting better and better at it. It's also really important that if you do the 6 types of working genius and the inventor types, wanderers and inventors are 2 different types of geniuses in the model, and they're very good at brainstorming. However, the invention genius is much better at facilitating the group around invention than the wonder geniuses are, right? Because they tend to stay in the questions, and every time ideas come up, they go back to questions, and that can be frustrating in the process of inventing. And so if you have people that are good at invention, have them lead the process. You don't always have to, right? So that's, I think, another tip that I would say. Any other tips that you have for either individuals or team leaders?
I mean, as I said, we talked earlier about creativity and people thinking that, it has to be the most flowerful person in the room and all that. It doesn't. Creativity comes from everywhere. And, everywhere. You just have to be able to recognize it and hone it as a supervisor. So, it doesn't have to be, as you said, big, big, big things. But if somebody creatively knows how to solve a problem, that's brilliant. That's a real big thing. And I think we just sometimes as bosses, you stereotype where creativity is going to come from in your group.
Good idea.
And
Good
so you
point.
don't look for it everywhere.
Yeah.
And really acknowledge that it's, in places that you wouldn't have expected.
Because it can be about, literally, and I've seen this, it can be about a better way to do a spreadsheet.
That's it.
Right.
Yes. And that's creativity.
That's creativity. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be and we're going to do an art project or have this community search. It doesn't have to be any of those things. It could be just something that's very simple. But that was a really creative way that you outlined that, a really creative way that you thought about that email. There's a lot in there.
I think also my last tip for the day would be is if you want to encourage more of this in your own life and more of your own thinking as an individual, I think you can give yourself challenges each day. Do you know what I mean? So that if you put on the calendar some invention time, even if it's 15 minutes where you're going to say, I'm going to just sit here and come up with a list of questions about my life, or how could I possibly do something differently? Or think of a problem that you have occurring in your life and go to a blank whiteboard and say, if I had a fairy godmother that they could wave her magic wand, what would I want this to look like? And then work backwards from there, so that we don't limit ourselves.
Yeah.
All right.
That's a good one.
Well, Blonka, thank you so much for being such an invention genius for us at work, and also for being here today to share some of those ideas and thoughts with our listeners. So
you are so welcome. Glad to be here always.
And also, just for the record, Tatiana is also an invention genius.
Way
and you
more.
two are so different, but it comes, like you said, it comes out in different ways. And I love that. It's really very powerful to harness that energy of invention and make it propel your company. Thanks, everybody, for listening. I'd like to give a special shout out to our podcast producer, Richard Francisco. Check out our notes for any details. And if you get anything out of this, please follow us. And if you enjoy it, please take a moment to rate us or write a comment. It will mean the world to us. We'd love to hear from you. And if you just can't get enough, follow me on TikTok and check out tlpnyc.com/podcast for more information.